In a galaxy far from Earth, a small crew of human explorers landed on a planet known as Zathora. Their mission was simple: to discover the secrets of an ancient civilization thought to have vanished centuries ago. They had followed a map, found in a long-lost archive, that led them to this place. The map had been in the hands of explorers who had disappeared, but no one could explain why. The moment they stepped onto the planet's surface, they noticed something strange. The air was thick, and the sky above them was clouded with an eerie, greenish hue. It was quiet, too quiet. No birds, no animals, not even a breeze. The only sound was the crunch of their boots against the dusty ground. "We should set up camp here," said Captain Rook, the leader of the crew. "Let's split into teams and begin our search. We're looking for clues about what happened to the people who lived here." Rook was a seasoned leader, but even he couldn't shake the uneasy feeling in his gut. Something didn't feel right about this planet. The team ventured deeper into the planet's ancient ruins. They uncovered strange markings on the walls. Symbols no one could recognize, etched into the stone, glowing faintly in the dim light. The air around them seemed to hum with a strange energy, and as they moved further into the ruins, the sensation grew stronger. "Do you feel that?" asked Lieutenant Dara, one of the crew members, her voice low with unease. "It's like the air is thick with something." Rook nodded, his hand resting on the pulse weapon at his side. "Stay alert. Keep moving." The group continued exploring, entering a large chamber at the heart of the ruins. In the center of the room stood a massive stone door covered in the same strange symbols. It looked like it had been sealed for centuries, untouched by time. "I've never seen anything like this before," said Dr. Hale, the crew's archaeologist. She examined the door closely, her fingers tracing the carvings. "This may be the key to understanding what happened here." She stepped back, scanning the area. "We need to figure out how to open it." Without warning, the door slowly creaked open, revealing a dark hallway beyond. The crew hesitated for a moment. Captain Rook gave a nod, signaling them to proceed. They moved down the hallway. The walls began to pulse with a strange light. Every step seemed to echo in the silence. The air grew colder, and a faint whispering sound began to fill their ears. It was barely audible, like a voice calling them forward, yet it had no source. "What is that?" whispered Dara, her eyes wide with fear. "I don't know," Rook replied, his voice barely above a whisper. "But we're not turning back now." The further they walked, the more the whispers grew louder. They began to feel like they were not alone, like eyes were watching them from the shadows. The crew pressed on, their steps quickening as the temperature dropped even further. Suddenly, they reached a large chamber, and what they saw inside left them speechless. At the center of the room was a massive stone pedestal, and atop it sat a glowing crystal. It pulsed with a strange energy, casting eerie light across the room. But it wasn't just the crystal that caught their attention. Around the pedestal were countless stone carvings of people, animals, and strange, otherworldly beings. But the most unsettling thing was that some of the carvings seemed to be moving. Their eyes followed the crew's every move. This is wrong," muttered Dr. Hale, her voice trembling. "These aren't just carvings. They're memories. The people who made these, they're still here." Rook frowned. "What do you mean?" "They've become part of the planet. The civilization that lived here didn't just disappear, they were absorbed into this place. Their souls, their very beings, are trapped in these carvings." The crew stood in horror, realizing that they had unknowingly stepped into a trap. The whispers grew louder, and the walls began to close in on them. The air grew thick, and it felt like something was pressing against their chests. "We need to get out of here," Dara said, panic in her voice. But it was too late. The crystal on the pedestal suddenly flared to life, and the ground beneath them began to tremble. The walls seemed to shift, and the floor cracked open. The crew scrambled to escape, but the exit had vanished, replaced by an endless black void. "We can't leave," Rook said, his voice firm but shaking. "This place is alive, and it's not going to let us go." The whispers became louder, almost deafening, and the crew felt the weight of thousands of eyes upon them. In that moment, they realized the terrible truth. The people of Zathora hadn't just disappeared, they'd been consumed by the planet itself. And now, the planet was hungry for more. It had been a long journey through the cold emptiness of space, but the crew of the starship Pioneer had finally reached their destination, a distant galaxy where the last known distress signal had come from. No one knew who had sent the signal or what had happened to them, but the Pioneer's mission was clear: investigate and find out. Captain Hayes stood at the front of the bridge, his hands gripping the rail as he looked out at the starfield. The silence of space was comforting, yet it felt unnatural. The only noise was the soft hum of the ship's engines. The crew had been traveling for days now, and everyone was anxious to uncover the mystery that lay ahead. "Captain," said Lieutenant Moore, his voice sharp, "we've tracked the signal. It's coming from a derelict station just outside the nebula. But there's no activity. No ships, no life signs. Just the signal, repeating over and over again. Can we get a visual?" Captain Hayes asked, turning to Moore. The lieutenant nodded and pressed a few buttons on his console. A screen flickered to life, showing a dimly lit space station hanging like a ghost among the stars. Its once pristine metal surface was now covered in patches of rust and decay. There were no lights on the station, no signs of life, just the faint, pulsing signal. "It looks abandoned," said Lieutenant Moore. "Should we proceed?" Captain Hayes looked at the station on the screen. The hair on the back of his neck stood up. Something about the place felt wrong. "Yes, but keep your guard up. We don't know what we're walking into." The ship slowly edged closer to the station, and the crew remained silent. As they approached, the air felt heavier, as though the station itself was pulling them in. "We're in position," Moore said. "Docking bay is open. We'll be able to board in a few minutes." "Prepare the team," Hayes ordered. "We don't know what we'll find inside." The crew donned their spacesuits and boarded the shuttle. The station loomed larger as they neared it, casting a shadow across the shuttle's hull. No one spoke. The only sound was the soft clanking of their suits as they moved. They docked with the station, and the airlock hissed as it opened. The crew stepped out, their boots clanging against the cold metal floor of the station. The silence was deafening. No sounds echoed in the empty corridors. Captain Hayes led the way, flashlight in hand, scanning the dark hallways. The walls were covered in grime and dust, and it was clear the station had been abandoned for a long time. There were no signs of life, no bodies, no movement. But the signal was still there, faintly pulsing in the background. "This place is like a tomb," whispered Dr. Lee, the ship's medical officer. "What happened here?" Captain Hayes didn't answer. He had a bad feeling about this place, but he couldn't shake the sense that they were being watched. They moved deeper into the station, and the farther they went, the stranger things became. The walls seemed to close in, and the air grew colder. The signal continued to pulse, now louder, more urgent. It was coming from somewhere nearby, but they couldn't pinpoint its exact location. Then, they reached a central chamber. The center of the room was a control panel, its lights flickering weakly. A large screen on the wall displayed a single message: "Help us." "Is this a warning?" asked Moore, his voice trembling. "Maybe," Hayes said, his mind racing. "But it's also a call for help. Someone is still here." The crew gathered around the control panel, trying to decipher the message. Dr. Lee attempted to interface with the system, but the screen suddenly went dark. For a moment, everything was quiet. Then, a loud noise echoed through the station, something heavy, scraping against the metal floor. "What was that?" whispered Moore, his hand moving to his sidearm. Hayes motioned for silence. They all froze, listening intently. Then, they heard it again, slow, deliberate footsteps echoing down the hallway. "Someone's here," Hayes whispered. "Stay close." The crew moved cautiously, their footsteps muffled by the thick dust on the floor. The sound of footsteps grew louder, closer. Suddenly, a figure appeared in the doorway. It was a person, or at least, it looked like one. The figure was tall, its body covered in dark, tattered clothing. Its face was hidden behind a mask, its eyes glowing faintly. The crew aimed their weapons, but the figure didn't move. It stood there, silent, watching them. Then, in a voice that sounded like it was coming from deep within the walls themselves, it spoke. "They're coming. The ones who did this. You need to leave. Now." Before anyone could react, the figure vanished into the shadows, leaving only the fading echo of its warning. "Did anyone else see that?" Moore asked, his voice shaking. Hayes didn't respond. He was already moving toward the control panel again, desperate to find answers. But as he reached out to activate the system, the station shook violently. Lights flickered and alarms blared. The station was coming to life, but not in the way they expected. "We need to go. Now." Hayes shouted .as. They rushed back toward the shuttle. The last thing they heard was the signal louder than ever. But now, it wasn't just a call for help. It was a countdown. And they had no idea what that the Explorer, a sleek human spaceship, cruised silently through the vast, dark emptiness of space. Captain Lila West stood at the command station, staring out at the endless sea of stars. Her crew was on a mission, one that many had called foolish. They were heading toward a mysterious region of space where no human had ventured before. No one knew what lay beyond, but the rumors were impossible to ignore. Whispers of a forgotten alien race, long lost to time, had stirred the curiosity of scientists and explorers alike. Approaching the boundary of the unknown, Captain Lieutenant Carter said, his voice calm but filled with uncertainty. His fingers hovered over the control panel, ready to make adjustments if necessary. Captain West nodded, her face unreadable. "Set course for the coordinates. Prepare for anything." As the explorer neared the edge of the galaxy, the stars seemed to shift, their patterns no longer familiar. It was as though the universe itself had bent and twisted in ways that couldn't be explained. The crew fell silent as they watched the stars blur into streaks of light and the ship crossed into the unknown. "This is strange," Carter muttered. "It feels like we're being pulled in two directions at once." "Don't let it distract you," Captain West replied, her eyes fixed on the vast expanse ahead. "Stay focused." Minutes passed. The ship continued to glide forward, and soon something appeared in the distance. It wasn't a star, but a faint light, glowing softly in the emptiness. As the explorer approached, the light grew brighter, and they saw a massive structure, something ancient, something alien. "Is that a station?" Dr. Ava Bennett, the ship's scientist, asked from her seat, her eyes wide with awe. "It's something," Captain West said, her voice tense. "Let's find out what." The explorer slowed as it neared the mysterious structure. It was enormous, much larger than anything humanity had ever built. Its surface was smooth, almost organic in appearance, with strange symbols carved into the metal. The light emanated from the core of the structure, pulsing gently as though alive. There were no signs of movement, no ships in the vicinity, just the eerie glow. "Docking bay secured," Carter said, his voice steady. "Ready to board, Captain." "All right, everyone, stay sharp," West commanded. "Dr. Bennett, you're with me. The rest of you stay on board and monitor the ship." With their helmets securely fastened, West and Bennett stepped into the airlock. The door to the alien station creaked open, and a cold draft greeted them. The air was stale, yet there was something unsettling about it, something that made the hairs on the back of their necks stand up. They moved cautiously through the dark, empty halls of the station, the glow from the central core casting long shadows. As they explored deeper into the heart of the structure, they found what appeared to be an ancient control room. "There's a terminal here," Dr. Bennett said, pointing to a strange console that seemed to have survived the ages. It flickered to life as Bennett approached, its surface covered in dust but otherwise intact. She carefully ran her fingers over the alien symbols etched into the console. "I've never seen anything like this," Bennett said, her voice trembling slightly. "This technology is far more advanced than anything we have." Before Captain West could respond, the ground beneath them trembled. The station seemed to shudder as if waking from a long slumber. The lights in the room flickered, and an ominous hum filled the air. "We need to get back to the ship," West said, her voice sharp. But before they could leave, the terminal suddenly burst to life. A hologram flickered in front of them, a figure, tall and thin, with glowing eyes. "Warning," the hologram said, its voice low and cold. You should not have come. The darkness. It will consume you. Wes's heart raced. She stepped back, instinctively reaching for her weapon, but the hologram continued. You are not the first to find us. You will not be the last. The stars are not what they seem. They hide. The truth. The hologram flickered again and then vanished, leaving only the eerie hum of the station behind. Did that just... Dr. Bennett whispered, her face pale. Did we just activate something? Captain West didn't have time to answer. A low rumbling echoed through the station, and suddenly the entire structure began to shift. Walls moved, floors cracked open, and the once still station now seemed alive, reacting to their presence. We need to leave, now. West shouted. As they ran toward the docking bay, the station's walls seemed to close in on them. The station wasn't just a relic, it was a prison. And something was locked inside, something that had been waiting for centuries to be freed. They reached the airlock just as the station began to collapse around them. As the doors sealed behind them, Wes couldn't help but look back at the structure, its glowing core still pulsing ominously. Captain, what do we do now? Dr. Bennett asked, breathless. We get out of here, Wes said, her voice firm, but her mind raced. What had they unlocked? What had they disturbed? As the explorers sped away from the station, the last thing they saw was the dark, shifting mass of the station disappearing into the void. But something had changed. The stars were no longer the same. The darkness beyond them was not as empty as it had once seemed. And deep within that darkness, something was waking, something that had been waiting for the right moment to return. Hey, we're counting down to... The Eclipse was humanity's most advanced exploration ship, a sleek vessel designed to travel to the farthest reaches of space. Its mission was simple, to investigate the mysterious black hole known as Obsidian's Eye, a dark void in the galaxy that no one had dared approach. Scientists had theorized that this black hole held the key to secrets that could change everything humanity knew about the universe. And now, Captain Miles Dalton and his crew were tasked with uncovering those secrets. As the Eclipse entered the outer rim of the black hole's gravity well, the stars around them began to twist and distort, stretching into long lines as the ship was drawn closer. The crew had been briefed on the dangers of entering a black hole's event horizon, but none of them could fully prepare for the feeling of being pulled into something so vast, so unknowable. Captain, said Lieutenant Tara Lewis, her voice tense as she glanced at the monitors, we're nearing the event horizon. The gravitational pull is getting stronger. Should we turn back? Dalton's eyes remained fixed on the view screen, the swirling abyss ahead of them. He hesitated for a moment, his mind racing with the weight of the decision. No. We came this far for a reason. Prepare the crew. We're going in. With a final command, the ship's engines roared, and the Eclipse plunged into the black hole's depth. The crew braced themselves as the ship shook violently, the lights flickering with each surge of power. It felt as if time itself was stretching, bending, warping around them. They had no idea what to expect, but Captain Dalton knew they couldn't turn back now. The ship tumbled through the darkness for what seemed like hours. The crew was quiet, their faces illuminated by the dim lights from the control panels. The deep, unnatural silence of the black hole pressed on them, and every second felt heavier. Then, suddenly, the ship stopped. The shaking ceased, and the hum of the engines fell silent. Dalton barked, rising from his seat. We're not in the black hole anymore, said Lieutenant Lewis, her voice filled with disbelief. The gravity's normal, but the readings, everything's different. We're in some sort of pocket of space. It's like nothing we've ever seen before. Captain Dalton's heart raced. Are we still in the event horizon? No, Captain, Dr. Sophie Allen, the ship's lead physicist said, stepping forward. We've somehow passed through it. But we're not in regular space either. This is something else. Dalton stared out the view screen. What he saw made his breath catch in his throat. They were surrounded by a swirling, glowing nebula, its colors shifting in patterns they couldn't understand. But what was most shocking was what was at the center of this strange space, a massive, ancient structure floating motionless in the void. It appeared to be a city built into the side of a giant dead star. "What is that?" Lewis whispered. "It's not from any known civilization," Dr. Allen said, her voice trembling with excitement. "This is older than anything we've discovered. This might be the key to everything we've been searching for." Dalton took a deep breath, his fingers tapping lightly on the chair arm. "We'll send a team to investigate. Prepare a shuttle." As the shuttle departed from the eclipse, the crew marveled at the sight of the ancient city up close. The buildings were enormous, towering over them like forgotten giants. The surface of the city was covered in strange symbols and markings that seemed to shift when no one was looking directly at them. "This place doesn't feel right," Lieutenant Lewis muttered. "It's like it's alive." Captain Dalton felt a chill run down his spine. "Keep your focus. We don't know what we're dealing with." They landed near the entrance to what appeared to be a grand hall. The massive doors creaked open, revealing a dark, empty chamber. The air inside was thick and cold, filled with an unsettling silence. As they moved deeper into the hall, the atmosphere grew heavier, and an oppressive feeling settled over them. "Look at this," Dr. Allen said, pointing to the walls. The markings that covered the walls were moving, shifting like a living thing. They were the same symbols that were on the city's exterior. "I don't like this," Lewis said. "We need to get out of here." Before anyone could respond, a low hum filled the room. The lights flickered, and then, without warning, a voice echoed through the chamber, cold and distant. "Welcome, travelers," the voice said. "You are the first to enter this place in millennia. But you have come too late." The crew froze, looking around in confusion. Who are you?" Dalton demanded. The voice spoke again, but this time it was different, distorted, as if it were coming from deep within the walls. "You have unlocked the secret of the black hole, but the cost is your own destruction. This place was never meant to be found. You are the last to learn what should have been forgotten." The walls trembled, and the city began to come to life. Lights flickered on, casting shadows across the massive hall. The crew could hear strange mechanical sounds, something ancient, something deadly. "We need to leave. Now!" Dalton shouted. The crew ran toward the exit, but the doors slammed shut, trapping them inside. "You have awakened the prison," the voice boomed. "And now you will join us forever." The eclipse was still far away, and they were running out of time. The city was coming alive, and it was not happy to have visitors. Dalton and his team fought their way through the dark, twisted corridors, but it was clear they weren't going to escape this place without paying the price. In the depths of the black hole, secrets had been hidden for a reason. The Eclipse's crew had found the truth, but now they were paying the price for uncovering it. The black hole had not been a mystery to solve, it had been a warning. And now, that warning was closing in on them. Captain Elena Cruz stood at the command console, her hands gripping the smooth surface as the Odyssey sailed deeper into the dark stretch of space known only as the Silent Zone. No ship had ever ventured this far before, and the eerie calm that surrounded them unsettled her. There were no stars, no signs of life, just endless, black nothingness. The communication systems had gone quiet for days, and the usual hum of the ship's engines felt distant and muffled, like the ship was moving through thick air. "Captain, I'm getting strange readings," said Lieutenant Daniels, his voice filled with confusion. He tapped at his screen, his brow furrowed in concern. "Something's out there, but it's not showing up on any of our usual scans." Cruz turned to face him, her eyes narrowing. "What kind of something?" "It's hard to explain," Daniels replied, his fingers working over the console in quick, anxious movements. "It's like interference. Almost like something's trying to block our sensors. But we're not supposed to be anywhere near any anomaly." Captain Cruz didn't like the sound of that. The Silent Zone was supposed to be empty of both stars and life. No planets, no satellites, just a vast stretch of nothing. Yet, the further they went, the more the sense of being watched grew. "Keep trying to get a clearer reading." "I want a report every 5 minutes, Cruz ordered, her voice calm but her mind racing. The ship had traveled this far on a simple mission to map the edges of space that humanity hadn't explored. But now, something felt wrong. Hours passed, and crews couldn't shake the feeling that they were being followed. The feeling was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it was there. She could feel the ship's pulse echoing through her, but it was the quiet ones, the whispers that she couldn't ignore. "Captain, you need to see this," Daniel said, his voice trembling as he called her over to the main viewing screen. Cruz walked over and looked at the screen. For a moment, she thought it was a mistake, but the image was clear. In the distance, barely visible against the endless void, was a massive structure. It wasn't a ship. It wasn't any kind of object she'd ever seen before. It was a station, but its design was strange, otherworldly. "Is that a station?" she asked, her voice low with disbelief. "It doesn't look like anything from our charts," Daniels replied. No human ship could build something like this. A chill ran down her spine. She had heard the tales of lost ships that had vanished into the silent zone. Some believed it was a place where time distorted, where ships got caught in a never-ending loop. But no one had ever found proof. "Approach it slowly," Cruz ordered, her voice steady. "We don't know what we're dealing with." As the Odyssey moved closer, a low, static hum filled the bridge. The air seemed to grow heavier, as if the ship itself was being pulled by an invisible force. Cruz's fingers tightened on the edge of her chair. The station loomed larger, its silhouette growing clearer as they closed the distance. It looked like a giant, decaying shell, its surface smooth and gleaming in the dim light. But there were no lights, no signals, nothing to indicate any kind of life. "Prepare a team," Cruz commanded. "We're going aboard. I want answers." The team gathered in the airlock, their suits tight and their faces serious. The captain, Daniels, and Dr. Nicole Harris, the ship's scientist, led the way as they moved toward the station's docking bay. The airlock of the station opened slowly, creaking and groaning as if it had not been used in centuries. Inside, the station was dark, too dark. Their flashlights barely cut through the thick shadows that filled the halls. The walls were smooth, like metal, but they glowed faintly, as if they had absorbed the light of distant stars long ago. There were no signs of life, no people, no creatures, just the silence. The oppressive silence. The team moved deeper into the station, their footsteps echoing eerily in the hollow hallways. "Nothing on the scanners," Dr. Harris said, her voice tinged with fear. "But it feels like something is watching us." "We need to keep moving," Cruz said, her voice sharp. "Keep your focus." The deeper they went, the heavier the silence became. It pressed against them, filling their ears with a soft, almost imperceptible whisper. It wasn't coming from anywhere specific. It was as if the station itself was whispering, calling them. "Do you hear that?" Daniels whispered, his eyes darting nervously. "Hear what?" Cruz asked, glancing at him. "The whispers. They're faint, but they're there." Cruz stopped, her heart racing. She didn't hear anything at first. But then, just as Daniels had said, there was soft voices murmuring in the distance. The sound was everywhere, all around them, but there was no source. It was as if the very walls were alive, breathing with ancient secrets. The whispers grew louder, clearer. Words began to form, though they were in a language none of them could understand. Then, without warning, the walls around them shuddered and the whispers stopped. Silence filled the space once again. "What just happened?" Dr. Harris asked, her voice trembling. Cruz didn't have an answer. All she knew was that they needed to leave. The feeling of being watched grew stronger, and suddenly, the entire station seemed to groan as if waking from a deep slumber. Something was moving, something was alive inside this place. "We need to get back to the ship," Cruz ordered, her voice firm. Now, the team turned, but the corridors had changed. What was once familiar was now foreign. The walls twisted, and the layout of the station shifted, like it was alive, adapting to their movements. As they rushed back toward the docking bay, the whispers returned. They were louder now, more urgent, but they weren't warning them. They were calling them. Captain Cruz and her team barely made it back to the Odyssey before the station closed in on itself, vanishing into the darkness. As the ship blasted away from the mysterious station, Cruz looked at the coordinates one last time. They were gone. The station, the whispers, everything had disappeared. But in the back of her mind, a chilling thought remained. The whispers in the void had not been a warning. They had been an invitation.